Welcome to Heian Haven. I'm Dawn. Today we're discussing Chapter 25 of the Tale of Genji, Hotaru, Fireflies. We'll start with our usual summary for shared context. Genji's exalted status left him free from the burdens of state to live at his ease, and all those that depended on him were well taken care of, satisfied, and secure, save Tamakazura. She kept the secret of Genji's behavior and disliked him intensely for it. After receiving a letter from Sochinomiya, His Highness of War, Genji had Tamakazura's gentlewoman, Saisho, write a response allowing the prince to visit. Tamakazura ponders using her suitor as a way to escape or otherwise control Genji's behavior. Upon his visit, His Highness was seated near Tamakazura with just a standing curtain between them. Saisho served as intermediary. Genji arranged things so that a flash of light from fireflies gave the prince a glimpse of the beautiful Tamakazura. They exchange poems about fireflies, and he leaves before dawn. Tamakazura wishes her father knew about her, and would feel differently about Genji if the situation wasn't as it is. The Sweet Flag Festival, on the 5th day of the 5th month, brought an archery competition to the riding grounds of Rokujo. Genji stopped by Tamakazura's quarters on his way there, inquiring about His Highness's visit the night before. Sochinomiya, now also known to the reader as Prince Hotaru, sent a letter attached to a sweet flag root, and Tamakazura actually sent a response herself. She also received herbal balls, a traditional gift, from all her suitors. Genji advises Hanichiro Sato to prepare for the riding and archery contests and taking care of Yugiri's men and all the princes that would attend. Page girls and gentlewomen watched the contests from the residences of Hanichiro Sato and Murasaki. There was music and dancing and gifts for the participants. Genji spent the night with Hanichiro Sato, but no longer in the same bed. The long rains seemed never to cease, and the women of Rokujo spent their idle hours with illustrated tales, especially Tamakazura. Seeing tales scattered about her room, Genji gives a long speech about stories being lies. Tamakazura challenges that. He then goes on at length to explain how stories are important. He accuses her of being unfilial while stroking her hair, and she counters that his so-called paternal love is unlike anything she has read about, shaming him into going no further. Murasaki is also reading illustrated tales to the Akashi princess. Genji carefully selects the stories she is to have to prevent bad examples from influencing his young daughter. Yugiri, Genji's son, has been given access to see his little sister, the Akashi princess, and they play with dolls from time to time. He is not allowed anywhere near Murasaki, not even near her gentlewoman. While he corresponds with many women, his heart still belongs to Kimono, and though he is not officially courting her, he does still want to marry her, after he gets back at Tono Chujo for his low start at court. Tono Chujo, the palace minister, in thinking about his daughters, is reminded of the one he lost, who we know as Tamakazura, and tells his sons to listen if a woman shows up claiming to be his daughter. He has a dream, and it is interpreted that he will soon find that someone is caring for a child he lost long ago. Chapter 25. I had some feelings about this one going through. Pity and empathy for Tamakazura, the usual outrage at Genji's behavior, but I was really excited by the color descriptions of the clothing. Waley, Seidensticker, and Tyler all had lovely descriptions, and they were fairly similar. And then I read Washburn, and the same similarities were showing up. And then I read this footnote. There is no firm consensus about what color combinations certain styles employed, and my choices here simply represent likely combinations. I almost threw the book. There were profanities. I definitely marched around my house ranting about Kasane no Irame and its importance, how combinations were judged like poetry contests, and how dare he just make stuff up. Has he even studied the color combinations? How could he possibly think this is okay in a book where color and clothing take such a prominent role? Can I even trust anything he says in regards to color and clothing? He already uses useless Western terms for garments. Did he make other instances up? What does this mean for my project if I can't trust the data? There was more. I'd like to say I've calmed down about it since then, but this whole project kind of hinges on the information I can glean on color combinations, and knowing Washburn just made stuff up? No, I haven't calmed down. I'm still a little ragey about it, and I expect I'm going to have major problems with his translation from this point forward. I've been so upset about it that it was a substantial contributing factor to how infuriatingly long it took me to finish the script for this video. I knew eventually things would happen to make reading one or more translators a bit of a chore, making this incredibly long project drag even more slowly. Waley already is. I just didn't expect it to be Washburn or Tyler. At least it's not Tyler. And I do take some small comfort in his clothing glossary since he uses Western clothing terms, but that doesn't really matter. I can't truly trust that anyone got it right, and that's why it's exciting when two or more of them use the same colors, which, as I mentioned before, happens in this chapter. We'll talk about that later. Right now, let's take a look at a few translation differences, starting with the provided title. Have I talked about the titles before? How they came into existence? Like Washburn's colors, they're made up. Despite what Google's AI will tell you, it is my understanding that Murasaki Shikibu did not name her chapters. Most likely, the traditional titles were inserted by copyists, possibly during the Heian period. So I think there's definitely some liberty that can be taken with the titles. Though our translators typically stick to traditional chapter titles, and for this chapter, that is Fireflies. Waley is the only translator to not use fireflies, using the glowworm instead, but here the difference is not quite what it seems, as glowworm is the term for fireflies in England, and Waley was English, so it's not really a difference. However, 2 pages in, Waley hands us a juicy discrepancy. He has inserted into the tale that Genji's brother, His Highness of War, contemplates whether or not Genji is actually Tamakazura's father, which would mean that he needs to treat Genji as a rival. No one else even has a hint of this in their translation. Apparently, Waley's method of translation was to read the chapter in Japanese several times and then write the English translation out from memory. This explains a lot about the differences and insertions we find in his translation. Waley tells us that Genji put the glowworms in a makeshift paper lantern. Everyone else says they were wrapped in silk. During the firefly incident, Waley expresses that Tamakazura saw Genji adjust the standing curtain, but again, no one else offers that in their translation. So it seems to be another insertion. As an aside, this kind of use of fireflies is written about often enough in the period literature to be a trope. During an instance of Genji lecturing Tamakazura, there's a line that caught my attention. Tyler translates the passage as, "Tact is always to be preferred." Washburn translates the section as, "It is always best, in all cases, to adapt to the situation at hand." I can see how those disparate phrases were meant in much the same way. Tamakazura had withdrawn from her interview with the prince, and Genji was insisting that she refrain from that kind of aloof behavior which made the prince uncomfortable, urging her to stay closer to him. Later in the chapter, after Genji has lectured Tamakazura about the worth of tales, he asks her if they should make their own story and share it. According to Seidensticker, she replies, "I think it very likely that the world will take notice of our curious story even if we do not go to the trouble." Washburn translates this differently. In his translation, Tamakazura replies, "Even if we don't make a story together, the relationship we do have is so bizarre and unbelievable that it will likely never become the subject of court gossip." Isn't it strange that the translators came to the opposite conclusions? Let's see what Tyler said in this passage. "Even if we do not, I doubt that one so strange could help feeding everyone's talk." It seems Tyler and Seidensticker are more in line in this instance. There is one similarity that stood out to me. All of our translators provide one detail in roughly the same way. It's a description of curtains. Waley says, "Curtains dyed in this new-fashioned way, according to which the color is allowed to run down into the fringe." Now, these curtains didn't actually have fringe on them. Hem or end is a more correct word. Here's Seidensticker. "New curtains too, the rich colors at the hems fading, as is the fashion these days, to white above." Tyler tells us in a footnote that this style is called tsusogo, cloth dyed so as to be light at the top and dark at the bottom. These new curtains were to help usher in the 5th month, which is when this chapter takes place. So we hear about the interminable rains and also the 5th day of the 5th month, the Sweet Flag Festival. During the Sweet Flag Festival, people pulled up sweet flag, ayame, roots in search of especially long ones. Prince Sochinomiya sent a note to Tamakazura attached to a particularly lovely root, and, As part of the Sweet Flag festivities, there was both Chinese and Korean music. Seidensticker calls it a Korean dragon dance. The traditional gift given for the Sweet Flag Festival is described as bundles of herbs bound in colorful thread, magic balls, herbal balls, and in a footnote, Waley describes them as balls made of colorful stuffs with scent bags in the middle, supposed to ward off disease. Seidensticker states that they were gifts of medicinal herbs in decorative packets. Tyler says they poured in from everywhere. Other than the mention of these traditional gifts, the guardsmen and other participants in the competitions at the riding grounds received gifts, according to their rank and performance that day. In our discussion of the clothing in this chapter, we're starting with an outfit Genji pulled together. Waley refers to Genji's ensemble for the Sweet Flag Festival as holiday clothes. This outfit had extraordinary colors. All of our translators give us a supernatural feel to how the clothes achieved their varied hues. Waley asks, did fairies preside over his dyeing vats? Even the familiar and traditional patterns, on such days as this, take on a new significance and beauty. Genji's clothes were of usual color and pattern, but also somehow special. Here's Seidensticker. The singlets and the robe thrown casually over them glowed in such rich and pleasing colors that they seemed to brim over and seek more space. One wondered whether a supernatural hand might not have had some part in the dyeing. The colors themselves were familiar enough, but the woven patterns were as if everything had pointed to this day of flowers. So what we have is someone making the most fashionable choice on the day of the festival that could be made. The ordinary elevated, at least in Tamakazura's eyes. Here's Tyler's description. Over a gown exquisite in gloss and hue, he casually wore a dress cloak so perfectly right that one wondered how it was possible, for the dyeing appeared beyond the craft of anyone in the world. Even its color, the same as always, seemed a miracle to her. Unfortunately, no mention of the color in this instance. The gown was an in-between garment, worn under the dress cloak, or noshi. This garment could be any color the wearer pleased. And even though I'm mad at him, Washburn's translation mirrors Tyler's with a few extra words. He had casually pulled on a cloak over his singlet, and their luxurious hues seemed to flow out around him, creating a brilliant combination. Where and by what means had such splendid robes been created? They didn't look like clothes dyed by human hands. Though the colors and the designs were nothing out of the ordinary, they struck Tamakazura as remarkably fresh and original. Also for the festival, Waley describes the men as wearing elaborate Chinese costumes, specifically designed for the day's festivity, the color of young dianthus leaf tending to prevail. And the ladies, who were not encouraged to make any special effort, were in thin summer gowns, green without and peach blossom color within. Seidensticker's translation also has girls in green robes, but includes that they wore trains of purple gossamer. I'll remind you that the 5th month was the start of summer, and the weight of silk used in summer was light and sheer, gauze or something like organza, gossamer. Tyler uses the name of a color combination, Sweet Flag, in his description. Let's pause and explore Sweet Flag. First, there's a conflation between the plant Sweet Flag, which has leaves very similar to iris, and the Japanese iris ayame or shobu. Leaves and roots are much the same. The flowers are quite different, and when we look at the particular kasane for Sweet Flag, it is definitely the iris we are evoking. That combination is made up of blue-greens, pinks, and white. Waley's comment of green without and peach blossom color within is definitely this. Peach blossoms are a shade of pink after all. So we have 3 translators that altogether point us to the 2 Sweet Flag combinations. This is when the research is very satisfying. We have some differences when we get to the next part of Tyler's description. The page girls in Sweet Flag layered gowns and violet silk gauze dress gowns. Dress gown is uwagi, a semi-formal robe. Seidensticker said train, so that could be the train or trailing hem of the uwagi, or the mo, the pleated backwards apron worn with a karaginu, or Chinese jacket. This next passage in Seidensticker makes me think he meant the mo. Describing another set of servants, he says, her women were in festive dress, trains blending from lavender at the waist down to deeper purple, and formal jackets the color of carnation shoots. Since he described the train as lavender at the waist, assuming this is where the garment starts, and that it is paired with a karaginu or Chinese jacket, he means a mo. But back to the earlier passage. Washburn translates it this way. Tamakazuра's page girls wore light purple dress gowns of gauzy silk over robes in the sweet flag style, blue lined in plum red. Here is where Washburn provides the infamous footnote, and I'm mad all over again. 1. Blue wasn't used in Kasane no Irome. There is zero evidence. I've ranted about this before. 2. Washburn is lazy. We do know about sweet flag. That combination in particular is incredibly well documented. 2 variations are provided in Liza Dalby's Kimono, which was published in 1993. Washburn's translation wasn't published until 2015. He didn't look hard enough, or even at all. I knew about this combination in the early 2000s, and if he didn't want someone else's translation of the period source Dalby bases her chapter on, it still exists, and he could translate it himself. Lazy. That aside, let's go back to our Mo-affirming passage, this time from Tyler, who concurs with Seidensticker's description. His translation says, "The 4 pleasantly practiced servants in bead tree trains darkening towards the hem and Chinese jackets the color of young pink leaves." Pink in this instance is a flower, not a color. It is another term for carnation. Here I'll pause to give Washburn some credit. The bead tree is also known as the China berry, which is what Washburn calls the style. This particular tree has flowers that are purple when buds and lavender as blossoms. We're paying attention to its blossoms because of the time of year. Seidensticker, Tyler, and Washburn all provide that the Mo is a gradation, light at the waist to a dark hem. Seidensticker and Washburn provide the color. But did Tyler refrain from providing a color because it wasn't in the text? Here's our last description of another group of servants. This is Tyler. The ones from the East Wing, in deep scarlet layerings, artlessly worn under pink dress gowns. This would be a striking combination, shades of red with a pink uwagi on top. Seidensticker has it this way. The lady of the orange blossoms had her little girls in very dignified dress, singlets of deep pink and trains of red lined with green. Okay, we've established that he's talking about a Mo when he says train, but I've never, ever heard of it being lined, especially in summer, but in general, not lined. Washburn translates that the page girls were in gauzy dress gowns in the pink style, red plum lined with blue, worn casually over dark red singlets. So Tyler and Washburn agree on the red, essentially. And as for what Washburn calls the pink style, he's using blue again, and I can't. It's not blue. It's never blue. The color just means blue now. Every book I have in English and Japanese translates the color ao in the Heian period as blue, green, or teal. I'm sure I'll say this again at some point the next time I'm frustrated with the blue being used with women's combinations. The only other clothing mention of color is Yugiri's sleeves when he entered court service at the 6th rank. We've discussed this one before too. Waley calls the sleeves his green badge, but Tyler says these sleeves were light blue. My research supports Tyler. We're getting close to halfway done with the project, and I know it looks like I'm running out of steam. I can promise you that I will finish this project. It will not be another of those disappointing Genji projects that dies the death of the never again updated. We'll get through this, eventually. The schedule is just going to be weird for a while as I deal with some personal stuff. Thanks for sticking with me this far. What stood out for you in this chapter? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Join me next time for chapter 26, Tokonatsu. Subscribe if you'd like to explore the Heian period of Japan with me through the tale of Genji.